Hello and a very warm welcome to this webinar hosted today by Delta Energy and Environment. Today we'll be talking about smart charging and taking a look at some of the different approaches to smart charging, the values that can be accessed through smart charging and what the future might look like. We are delighted to have so many people registered and attending the webinar today. I see that there are still quite a few folk dialing in, but I think since it's just gone past past, we will make a start. So, first of all, let me introduce you to my two colleagues that are joining me here today. So I've got Alex Lewis-Jones and Matti Kahola with me.
Hi everyone.
Hi
You can
everyone.
say hello. And my name is John Murray, and hopefully you should be able to see our faces on this slide and a little description of who each of us is. Both Alex and Matti work on Delta's EVs and electricity research service. This service focuses on the intersection between the electricity sector and the EV industry and provides insights and market intelligence across the European market. The material that we will be presenting during the webinar today is taken directly from this research service, with highlights taken from the smart charging report that was published for subscribers to the service about a month ago. Before we get started on the webinar properly, some brief housekeeping. We will present for around half an hour, and we will have around about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So throughout the whole webinar, there is the opportunity to ask us any questions that you might have. You should have a box on the right-hand side of your screen, so please feel free to add any questions or comments in there. We will monitor those throughout the webinar. We may come to two of those during the webinar, but we will certainly come to those questions at the end. The webinar is being recorded, so there will be the opportunity to watch the webinar back at your leisure or forward the webinar onto your colleagues. And I think you'll be emailed a link to the recording once it's published online later today. So the agenda for the webinar, first of all, we will be discussing what we mean by the term smart charging. This term can mean lots of different things to different people, so we'll give you our view of what we mean by smart charging. Then we'll go on to talk about some of the energy system values and customer benefits that can be accessed through smart charging. There are different approaches to how smart charging can be delivered to the customer, so we'll discuss a few of these. Then we'll have a quick poll to get the opinions of all of you that are on the webinar today, before finally discussing our views on the future. And like I said, at the end we will have a Q&A session for about 10 minutes. I'm aware that quite a few people on the webinar today might not be so familiar with Delta and what we do, so let me just give a very brief introduction. Delta exists to help our clients navigate the transformation of the energy system from old energy to new energy. And we provide advisory services to help our clients succeed in this transition. But what do we mean by old energy and new energy? So in the past, energy generation has been centralized, generally carbon intensive, involving the sale of kilowatt hours and with very little engagement with the end customer. Today, as I'm sure all of you are aware, the energy system is changing rapidly to one which is much more distributed, low carbon, with value, more centered around offering customer-centric services and solutions. In other words, the energy system value is heading more downstream. And I think that's something that is certainly relevant for EVs and the transition between vehicles and the electricity system as well. Delta's sole focus is on new energy, and we provide support to our clients through a few different ways, one of which is subscription-based research services. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the different knowledge areas that we focus on within our subscription services. We also provide bespoke consultancy to our clients, and throughout the year we also host various events and summits. And at the bottom of the screen you should see just some of our clients that we supported in the past and continue to support today. If you'd like to learn more about how we support our clients, please do get in touch after the webinar. Okay, over to Alex, who will talk a little bit about smart charging.
Okay, thanks very much, John. Hello, everyone. In the EV team, we started looking at smart charging about 6 months ago. And one thing we found is that there are a great variety of solutions out there. There's a lot of different terminology, and one thing we really wanted to get to was a key definition on what smart charging is. So in this first section, we will go through how we have defined it. So broadly, smart charging is about connected and controlled EV charging sessions. We created a concentric circles model to show you how we see that. At the center of the circle, you've got the electric vehicle. And of course, to support smart charging, you need various technologies. First, you've got to have an internet connection to provide that connected aspect of the charging session. You of course need a charger to carry out the charging. And there's got to be some level of intelligence to provide the control to that session. Okay, so we've got these technologies. Well, what are we going to do with them? Again, we saw 3 different aspects of activities here. The first is about shifting that charging session through a time shift to electricity system value. So if there is a benefit for charging your vehicle at a different time where it might be cheaper for the energy supplier, then this would be considered under time shifting. The other end of the spectrum might be a more local benefit. It might be balancing the load of the charge with other aspects of the local energy system. So if you have multiple EVs charging at one time, you might want to balance between them. Or indeed, if you have other appliances, then you might need to balance for capacity reasons. In between that, then we have the generation matching, and this is where the renewables side comes in. And this could be, again, with a local aspect, so if you have solar panels on your roof, or it might be more at a grid scale and move towards that time shifting element. So with all these activities, well, we're only going to do it if there is an end customer benefit. So we've split these benefits 3 ways. We see financial, we see environmental, and we see convenience benefits. To access these end customer benefits, we do need to access some of the energy system values. So we'll talk a bit more about that in this next session.
Thank you, Alex. So following up on that and talking a bit more about those 3 applications or use cases Alex mentioned there, and having a look at those of how those look from the perspective of the different stakeholders. So first, if you think of the end customer, and we look at in-building load balancing, this could be potentially of very high value to those customers that have some type of capacity constraint. It might be that actually for the function of they don't have a big enough grid connection, so they would actually really benefit from being able to not have all the loads on at the same time. But there could also be a financial incentive in some markets, like the Netherlands. There are capacity-based payments, and the smart charger could provide a good return on investment if you're right at the edge of, let's say, 2 different payment bands. And then local generation, I think the solar PV use case is quite obvious. So if you have excess solar PV, then the returns can be quite significant if you're currently exporting a lot of that solar PV generation to the grid, and with also the kind of bigger trend across Europe of solar PV subsidies kind of going away from supporting exports. And then in some markets, there are already time of use tariffs, even hourly tariffs available, for instance, in the Nordics, and also some more simple day and night rates and different 2-tier systems. And there is some value in this, but often the volatility of the price is not quite sufficient to provide a really meaningful return. So I think there's some value to the end customer there. But then again, all of these are not really widely available to all of the customers. So there will be a subset of customers of the mass market that will actually have access to any of these values. And oftentimes the same customers won't have access to all of these values. That's quite rare. But then when we think of a bit more at the system level, if you think of the system operator who's running the whole electricity grid for let's say a country, then really the in-building load balancing or the local generation matching doesn't really support their needs, so it's not really applicable for them. But there is some value if we can time shift away from peak times and they maybe reduce the overall peak for the grid, the peak demand. But then again, that's some value and only will become more significant once the EV penetration goes up, and currently probably it's not really meaningful. And then if we look at the DNO or DSO, so more at the local level, yet again, there's not really in the in-building load balancing. Yes, it might reduce the peak consumption of a particular home, but where that home is located might not be a problem area for the DNO. So yet again, it's a bit dependent on luck more than anything else if it's of value to the DSO. And then for the time shifting, yet again, the time price signals are not usually based on local constraints, but more on the wholesale pricing. And for the DSO, the problem is really more on the edges of the network or particularly weak parts of the network. And there's currently no real market mechanisms of delivering this price signal to the end customer. There are some trials, for instance, in the UK, a lot of work being done on this, but they are early trials and just looking to develop these mechanisms. So from the grid angle, the smart charging benefits still are quite limited, to be honest, and the access to these is very limited. And then looking at the energy supplier, you can almost argue that the local generation matching is more of a lost revenue rather than anything else. So they're probably not. You could almost think that might be a loss for them rather than any real value coming into the supplier. But then I think where the big interest is around energy suppliers and time shifting based on time of use tariffs, because this has a very strong link with their core business. So they'll have to procure energy from the wholesale market. And if they're able to have loads that they can control and impact, big loads like EVs, they can really shift those loads to cheaper times and also help with procurement and avoiding charges that they might occur if they're out of balance on the procurement. So I think this is where we see the big and sustainable value and also growing value, which they can leverage, and they already have a lot of the capabilities in-house of doing this and are doing this with more traditional assets.
Okay, Matti, can I ask you a question at this point, actually?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned here that there's some sustainable and I guess growing value for the energy suppliers who are providing the energy services to the end customer. But I guess they can choose to what extent they would pass on that value to their customers, I guess. So even though it's a value that's accessed by the energy suppliers, they might also be able to share the benefit, I guess, to some extent with the customers.
Yeah, and that's true. In a way, if you think of the time of use price signals, in a way that price signal is already transferred to the end customer. I guess the end customer really won't have visibility or knowledge of all the benefits that the energy supplier can have. If you think of the regular customer, just the average EV owner, they probably have no idea of how energy procurement happens at an energy supplier level. So they might be able to hide quite a bit of the benefits, share some of it, but maybe keep quite a bit of it as well.
Okay.
And I think that really moves on to the next topic of, the end customer benefits. I referred to some of the benefits coming from the energy system there, but then there are the three benefits Alex mentioned early on, and first being the convenience side of things. And to be honest, I think it is hard to find customers that would be willing to buy a smart charger purely based on these. These are more, in our view, hygiene factors, things that people might find interesting, might find an added bonus more than anything else, getting, let's say, insights on the energy consumption or some kind of remote control for the smart charger. But then again, the green agenda, I think there's a clear subset of customers who do find this appealing, and a lot of the early smart chargers have been sold on this premise and to these customers that you could kind of describe as early adopters or kind of green enthusiasts on that side. But I think to move on to the mass market, it is about that monetary benefits, and these have to a large degree come from the electric system values. So there has to be a way of companies doing exactly what you're talking about, sharing some of the value, passing that on. If those price signals don't exist directly through the wholesale market, for instance, the end customer, they have to find some type of proposition to pass this on. And there are examples of reward points like juice points, or companies giving even direct cash rewards. We'll mention some of the examples coming in later. But I think this is the big challenge for the industry. And then again, there is the subset of customers that might have their own local solar PV generation. For them, yes, there is value they can provide by optimizing that. But this is just a small subset of the mass market, and in a way, almost could be a separate niche from that. And then, as a bit of an anecdote, we often get asked the question, okay, do EV customers, do they care about shifting? Will they shift their consumption willingly, or does it all have to be automated, or do they even want to do this? There's an interesting example of Octopus Energy, who launched their Agile tariff, which is a dynamic time of use tariff. And on the red line, you can see the load curve for a customer before they had the Agile tariff, so before they had flat pricing, and then on the green when they have an hourly based pricing, and how the load shifts from that around 8 p.m. charging time to be at around after midnight, and that really shows they are willing to shift that consumption. This, of course, might be a bit of a self-selecting group of early innovators, but there is clearly at least a subset of customers who are willing to shift their consumption. Well, then maybe there's a question of, are we just creating another peak in the evening, but maybe, or at midnight? But then again, I think we're quite far from that being a problem at this stage of EV adoption.
Okay, thanks, Matty. So we're going to go and look at some of the examples now of different solutions out in the market, and there are dozens out there. We analysed a great number of these for our report, and predominantly we saw three particular approaches emerging. So first of all, there was the charger-centric model. This is really a solution that focuses on the charge point itself, having the intelligence within or connected to the charge point, connecting with the energy system data and managing it perhaps or communicated with the user via an app. An alternative to this would be the car-centric model. So maybe we can use the intelligence that's already going into the vehicle itself to communicate and control that charge. Again, an app might be used to communicate this with the user, but also it might give you greater access to the state of charge data, which is really important when managing charging. Finally, another area here was the home-centric model. So this would be for customers that might have solar panels on their roofs. They might have home energy management systems, or have a lot of connected home devices. So this is about offering a solution that works and complements with all these other technologies in the home or building. We'll give you a couple of examples now. So first of all, a smart charger solution. There are any number of smart chargers out there. Most charge point manufacturers are developing intelligent chargers today. We chose to look at Etrel because we found them quite an interesting company. They are a startup in Slovenia, and this year they launched the Etrel Inch product, which has been quite successful for them so far. It is marketed for domestic customers, and they offer initially they offer those energy insights. They will offer load management so that you can fast charge within your capacity when you're not using other appliances, but maybe when you're cooking, or in the evening when you're using the washing machine, say, then it will defer your charging to another time. Also, that's using AI to predict your behavior and develop new charging plans for you to try and really develop that user experience. It connects via an Ethernet cable into your home network. It can also come via Wi-Fi, though we have seen that there is a preference for the cabled solution because of the quality of the connection. Obviously, this is a standalone product, and thinking of those values that Matty went through earlier on, accessing those energy system values via the energy supplier, of course, it's got to be linked in with an energy supplier. As a standalone, it can't offer that. So if an energy supplier does take up this product, does white label it perhaps and offer it to their customers, then we can access greater grid values. An alternative that we will share with you is the car-focused software. So Jedlix is a great example here. This is far more of a niche at the moment, and Jedlix certainly are the leaders in this particular technology. They offer an app that you can download, and you connect it with your car, and you connect it with your energy supplier. I should mention that this is dominantly in the Netherlands at the moment. So if your energy supplier is Eneco, you can connect with them, and they will manage your charging session based on your needs. So when are you going to next use the vehicle? They will manage it based on the energy supplier's needs as well. And their focus is looking at grid renewables. They know that these are variable, and by choosing to charge your vehicle at the times when the renewables are at their greatest, when the wind's blowing, maybe when the sun's out as well, then they can get a more beneficial supply of electricity for the supplier. It becomes cheaper, and also it guarantees green charging for the electric vehicle owner. And also, they can pass down some of that financial benefit that they get from the energy suppliers down to the end customer. So currently it is at 2 € per kilowatt hour of charging that they will pass back. And then once you've accumulated enough on your account, on your app, then you will be able to collect that as a reward. They are also integrating with the car company's own apps as well. So it's a really good example of the automotive and electricity sectors working together to create a really useful and powerful user experience.
And then as a final example of the third approach, of the home-centric approach, and an interesting one, there are several, of course, of these as well, but just an interesting example is MyEnergy, a UK-based company, who actually quite interesting, were initially crowdfunded to develop the product. Their solution is really, in simplest term, optimizing the use of solar PV and charging your car with your own solar generation. The charger can work as a standard charger, but they also have a eco mode, which will look to divert as much as possible from the solar PV to the car, but also make sure the car is charged relatively quickly. And then also an eco plus mode, where it will only charge the car if there is excess solar PV generation. But then, of course, you can set settings for instance, to have a certain level of charge at a certain time when you need it. And they're really an interesting example of a company really tackling that home energy management niche, those customers that are already at the forefront of the new energy revolution, if I can say. And they've also interestingly expanded to from the Chappy charger to also have a Eddy product, which is linked with, for instance, your hot water tank. So can again make more use of that solar PV and potentially start building that home energy management system, that ecosystem in your home. And that's really been their approach. For instance, they don't yet have an app available. That's something they're developing and hoping to launch soon, and also hoping to launch a faster version of their charger, but really being focused on those customers, those potentially very high value customers, and engaging with them and gaining pretty good traction in the UK already.
So I guess that would be considered a bit of a niche application, Matty. Would it, if you've got a house which has got an EV charger with solar PV on the roof, potentially also with sort of electric heating, whether it's a hot water tank. But in those examples, and this could be a really good example of where you could get a lot of value just from kind of optimizing your own home energy use.
Yeah, the return on investment can be there already. And of course, it's a small subset of customers with solar PV. But of course, for EV owners, those are often the people that are most interested in this new technology, really looking to, well, they got solar PV, they made that move. Often it's not purely a financial move that they made that. There's also this green ideology behind it, and EVs is often the next kind of logical step they want to, take on that journey.
And one thing that we're finding there is actually maybe we're going beyond that, and actually EV owners who didn't have PV are now looking to get solar PV themselves. So they're kind of developing the two industries in parallel through these kinds of solutions. Are there any other solutions out there? Well, we know that there are, and when we have mentioned, our research to various people, they've said, "Oh, what about the cable? That's a piece of technology that you haven't mentioned here." And could the smart cable be a solution? I've put down a few pictures here of Ubitricity, of their solution, and I should mention that our report did focus on the kind of domestic B2C aspects of it. So we weren't looking so much at what Ubitricity's focus is on today, which is a lot on solving this on-street problem, putting in lamp column dumb chargers and having all the intelligence within the cable. This is useful for billing and in neighborhoods where you might have multiple different users using that one lamp column. It could develop, but there are this didn't fitted outside of our core approaches that we saw developing.
All right. So we're now going to turn our gaze towards the future and what might happen going forward. But first of all, before we do that, we are going to launch our poll. So hopefully you should see on your slide there the poll question and the 4 possible answers. And with any luck, the software will allow us to open up the poll and allow everyone listening in to give us their thoughts on which of the 4 architectures is going to be most prevalent in 5 years' time. So the options are charger-centric, car-centric, home-centric, or other. And Alice gave one example there of the sort of cable-centric type model. So we can see already that some of you have voted already, so that's great. We will give you around about 30 seconds just to think about the question and think of the possible answers. So we can see that most people have voted. I think there's about 15% of you have still to cast your vote, and it may swing it one way or other. It's all looking pretty close, actually. So we'll just give you another 15 seconds to make your final choices, and then we'll close the poll and publish the results so that you can all see the results. Last 5 seconds. And then make your vote. Okay, and that's it. So we'll close the poll. I think most people actually voted, and hopefully we can share the results now so that you can all see. Okay, so there you go. There are the results. The results are in, and actually it's a very closely run race between charger-centric, car-centric, and home-centric. Pretty much a third each, which is it's actually fascinating to see that there's that sort of split. So I'm not quite sure exactly what we expected, but
that's very interesting. Maybe Matty's better at promoting the solutions than I am, because I see his option as one out there.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's an interesting split, and I think this does kind of illustrate how little we know, or how different opinions there are in terms of what the future will hold. And I guess we can share a bit about what our thinking is behind these. It diverges quite a bit from these, interestingly.
Yeah, I mean, we'll share our views. I mean, but absolutely, I think it does show that this market is one where there's so much activity going on, and not necessarily. We don't necessarily know which way it's all going to unfold going forward, but it's really fascinating to see those differences of opinion. But yeah, let's come on just quickly to our what our conclusions are from having looked at this space over the last few months. And the first point here is that the charger-centric solutions which are the ones which are by far and away, I think, the largest on the market today, especially within Europe. I think our view is that the charger-centric solution will continue to be the most prevalent, certainly for the next 2 to 3 years. Home-centric solutions, which we talked about, absolutely will continue to grow, we believe, with the kind of the growing uptake of EVs and EV chargers, and also with the growing uptake of solar PV. For sure, it will be a niche, but actually, where those stars align, it could actually be a very valuable position for home customers to be in that case. Car-centric solutions, well, I mean, we've seen it here that there's maybe not so much activity happening within car-centric today, but our view within Delta, I think certainly, is that there's a potential for significant growth within the sector, especially when the automotive industry, starts to sort of develop and move forward their propositions in this space. So I think, our view here is, not so much activity today, but for sure, big potential for significant growth in the next 5 to 10 years. And finally, our view will be that the winners within the smart charging space will be the platform providers that will aggregate across these solutions and be able to attract the benefits both at a very local and grid level.
And I think it may be the kind of differing opinion of the home-centric model that getting a lot of votes, a lot of popularity there. It comes down a bit to how quickly do you think the transition to more decentralized generation goes, and how quickly that transition happens. Because in a way, you can see that being very linked with, let's say, solar PV adoption. There's, of course, policy angles there and different subsidy mechanisms that can really have a big impact on that. So in a way, 5 years' time, with this space, it's moving so fast, so quickly, that you can actually think that it really comes down to how quickly you think the overall transition goes. And that maybe takes a bit to the kind of smart charging landscape, and in bringing a bit more kind of meat on the bone, a bit about what the actual companies are doing if we talk about the actual players in the market. And I think there's on the y-axis, so there's some decision making purely on the local level, primarily for that load balancing or optimizing that solar PV, and then more on the local level, and also taking in the kind of signals from the electricity grid. And on the x-axis, we have the players coming from the e-mobility side of things, and then also more from the electricity or energy side of things. And I think a lot of the early activity was kind of the top two quadrants there, with companies developing solutions, focusing on local, making use of those early adopters, those early innovators with solar PV, and players from both sides from both e-mobility and energy. But then we've seen a lot of movement towards kind of making use of those values from the grid, trying to do the early innovation to get access to these values. And this is where we believe the market will move. All of the players are kind of diverging towards this. It's a bit of a different angle if you're more from the energy side of things, or if it's more of an e-mobility proposition to the customer. But then again, it's also that this space is not static. There's also, we've identified over 50 aggregators in Europe that are somewhat active in providing flexibility, aggregating loads. And you can see a lot of these are already partnering with some of the charge point providers, helping them aggregate the loads and make access to those, let's say, flexibility revenue streams. And these companies will definitely look to move in. And then there's the big giants out there, the automotive players, especially the car OEMs. A lot of their cars already have much of the connectivity in the cars. Of course, currently their focus is much on actually delivering the vehicles. But once you get further on that, does the attention shift more into, okay, what are all the other revenue streams we can bring in?
Yeah. And just to come in there, Matthew, I think that's a really important point there. There's a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainty about what the EV landscape will look like in terms of what cars will I be able to buy in 2 or 3 years' time. We know that all the big OEMs are preparing themselves for mass rollout. And internally, they'll be building up their own technologies, their own connected car technologies, of which EV charging is just one aspect. So my top tip would be to go and look at what are these car companies doing, what kinds of intelligence are they putting in, because that could really disrupt the sector for EV charging going forward.
Great, Alex. Thank you very much for that. And we're coming towards the end, so I think now's a good time to ask any questions that you might have. Like I said, we'll have 10 minutes for questions. So now's maybe a good time just to drop your question into the box. As we mentioned at the start, all this material that we presented during the webinar is from Delta's, our EVs and Electricity Research Service. So this is a service that we operate on an ongoing basis, and that we provide to our subscribers. And the service is very much aimed at the intersection between the electricity sector on the one hand and EVs on the other hand. And Delta sits right in the middle of that intersection. So we're really trying to get under the skin of this space and identify what's happening today, what will happen in the future, and really trying to understand where the value is in this space, what are the customer propositions that are being developed, and ultimately who is going to win within this space. That's all about, that is what our focus is within this within the service. The service is European focused, so we're looking across the European market, but also looking at what's happening in other sectors, in other parts of the world, such as North America, in Asia, in Australia, for example, and taking those learnings to see how they are being applied within the European market context. So this is what we're looking at within the EVs and Electricity Research Service. And just quickly on some of the how we deliver this service to our clients, we provide a number of in-depth reports throughout the year. This webinar today has been focusing on smart charging, and we published just last month our smart charging report. And we've got another report due, which is going to focus on electrification of fleets, published before Christmas, hopefully. In addition to the in-depth reports, we are doing new primary customer research. So speaking with customers who own EVs to understand how they see different propositions that are coming to market. So really trying to understand, how you can best develop a proposition that meets the needs of customers. And the other thing that we're developing is a really impressive info base, which is live and growing all the time. So far, we've profiled over 150 companies across the European e-mobility landscape, looking at what these players are doing today, who they're partnering with, and how they differentiate from others in the market. And alongside that, we are regularly publishing viewpoints to subscribers, giving our view of what's happening on the market. And of course, all subscribers benefit from the ability to ask us questions at any time. We're very happy to receive questions and provide support to our subscribers on an ongoing basis. So that's our service, and very happy to discuss that with any one of you. So thank you very much for listening. And now we've got the time for Q&A at the end, and we've had a huge amount of questions coming in throughout the webinar. So thank you very much for those. We'll spend about 10 minutes now trying to answer some of them. I think we're not going to get through them all because there are just so many, and some of them are not always the most simple to answer. But what we can do is, if we don't get the chance to answer your question today, then we'll come back to you via email afterwards. But let's just go to the first one. Somebody asked a question: which countries are leading on smart charging? So which countries are pushing the boundary when it comes to smart charging today? Alex, do you have a view on that, do you think?
So with a lot of smart technology generally, we do see that a lot of the innovation has come from countries like the Netherlands. So a lot of smart charging is rolled out there. But also other key markets there, such as Germany as well. And maybe we'll see more growth in 2019 in countries such as the UK and France, particularly with the UK with new legislation coming through, which is saying that smart will become mandatory. If we see that across Europe, I think the rest will catch up with the Netherlands.
And I think this also links with actually quite two other questions that were asked there. One was around, why would people adopt smart if smart charging, if you can get a dumb charger for, let's say, £100, €100? Well, one option is if it is actually mandated, if it's in the legislation, which is kind of the way UK seems to be going.
Yeah, so I think that is a really important point there, in that we have a great variety of technology out there, but are people actually taking it up?
Yeah. I guess that comes back. Sorry to interrupt, Alex.
Right.
to the benefits that Matthew was talking about earlier. That there's a huge amount of benefits, both at sort of the local house level, but also the system benefits and values. But actually being able to access those and package them up into a proposition which is really attractive for the customer to then shell out the additional money for a smart charger versus a dumb charger. That is the key puzzle that the industry is looking to try and address.
Or maybe it's the energy supplier that takes the hit on the cost at the start of it, and the customer doesn't actually pay more for it, and it's kind of amortized over time. And
so part of a sort of almost like a bundled proposition, perhaps, where an EV customer might get access to a charger, an EV tariff potentially, maybe access to public chargers as part of one sort of bundled proposition, which means that customers don't have to fork out the additional money for a smart charger.
There's also another question around V2G chargers as well. I guess that links with the UK development as well. It's kind of been...
Yeah, no, I should have mentioned as well that we were focusing on smart charging being a unidirectional solution, so we didn't have any focus on bidirectional there in this presentation. Certainly 2018 has been the year of V2G, so much excitement and so many large-scale projects announced, especially in the UK via the Innovate UK funding that has come in. We'll still see that we're going to be a couple of years away from this really being commercialized. We're taking it from a provable concept level to, okay, can we actually build a business model from this, and will customers accept it? And have there been published results so far from these projects? Well, it's really very early days, and we still need to see wide-scale deployment from these projects to really know.
Yeah. I think the cost, for instance, they're still way up there, and the volumes are so low in terms of the actual units.
And that's it. And that's when we start really rethinking the charge point retail model. We know that most electric vehicles are leased these days. So if the charge point's going to run into thousands of euros, then we get towards thinking, okay, well, can we just bundle it in with the vehicle and lease it out as an option there?
There's a question that's come in around. Well, the question is, does the market look different if considering fleets versus kind of individual car ownership? And that's a pretty timely question, right? Because the next report that we're publishing and looking at the moment is around the electrification of fleets.
Fleets is a very interesting topic. And when we think of those early adopter categories, some fleets, they know exactly what they're doing, what kind of journeys every single day. And if they're returning to the depot as well, they've got a really predictable and flexible charge cycle. So there might be specific opportunities here to engage fleets with smart charging, and some of the more basic options will become necessary. If you've got 10 vans all parked next to each other and you've got a limited capacity for that building, then you might need to distribute the load across those different charge points, and that is a kind of a master slave solution that we're seeing out there already and widely adopted at a commercial level. Again, when we get towards vehicle to grid, there could be considerable opportunities here where if you do have, again, 10 vans parked next to each other, then if you stack that up as an asset, as a response to a demand within the energy flexibility markets, then that could be where the greatest values come from.
All right, Thank you very much, Alex. There's a huge amount of questions that have come in here, which is absolutely fantastic. I think we maybe just got time for one more, maybe two, depending on how long Matty takes to answer this question. The question is, of the three smart charging architectures, what does the consumer have to do? How much is automated and how much engagement do you need from the end user?
Yeah, I think for all of these solutions at the moment, there's often a bit more needed from the end user that we probably ideally want to see. And kind of my kind of personal opinion, a lot of the research we've done around how engaged people are with energy, it's often not huge engagement. So ideally, you'd want to automate it as much as possible, in my opinion, of the process. And I think there is a certain level of input you need from the user. Let's say about, I want to leave next time, at 7 a.m. That's when I leave for work. Kind of these inputs. I don't think we're quite there yet for a fully automated solution where the user just plugs it in and leaves it be, because it's hard to predict human behavior and what needs you have. I think there's a bit of maybe a set schedule or set routine, and then the user might have to put a bit of input around if that diverges from it. And I think a lot of the solutions have much of this functionality already, and are kind of expanding on it.
Yeah, I agree. I just to further on that point, we are seeing more kind of intelligence or artificial intelligence going in to be able to predict people's behavior. Actually, some of the early movers here have found that actually their users their behavior is more predictable than they thought, and that makes it easier for them to access energy system values. Certainly, if you look at the app-based solutions, they are trying to make it as convenient for the customer as possible. And just going back to the Jedlix example, we know that they've integrated with Renault, who do have a 25% stake in Jedlix. They have integrated into the Renault ZE app if you're running it with a Renault Zoe, to make it the best user experience.
Great, thank you, Alex. Are there any final questions that we're going to answer?
I would just mention, if your question's not being answered, we will get back to you today.
For sure. Yeah, there's a lot of questions here. Some of them aren't always a sort of black and white answer, actually. So it's maybe more of a discussion point rather than a sort of a question and answer type thing. But yeah, we've got a lot of questions. But we will come back to you via email or by phone, perhaps in the next day or two. Any final thoughts? Overall views? I mean, I think it's been great to have you guys talk through the the highlights from the smart charging report. I think what we've seen is that there's there's a lot happening in this space for sure. There's a lot of players doing different things. As we saw from the poll result, the future is not necessarily clear, actually, and that was very evident from the results. And I think that's just borne out of the fact that there's so much happening and lots of different players doing different things. So it makes it an exciting space, and there's opportunities there for people that position themselves in the right way to access those values.
And to be honest, I think we were a bit overflown with questions. That was maybe a nice challenge to have here. So we'll try and get back to every one of you and kind of answer those questions via email or continue the discussion, because I think there were some really great questions around there which we didn't get to address right now.
Yeah.
But we'll definitely get in touch on those.
Yeah. We will come back to you. So thanks very much for listening. The webinar has been recorded, and we will send a link to everyone once it's been published online. If you would like to have the slides, we were happy to send those to you. Please just send us an email, and we will be happy to send the slide to you. So thank you very much for listening, everyone, and wishing you a very nice rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.